Good morning, all. Last class, we have understood what is data warehousing, what is data warehouse, and we have understood about OLTP, uses of OLTP, and limitations of OLTP, and a little about ETL process. So, in this class, we'll try to understand more about ETL process and Informatica architecture, right? So, ETL process. So the extraction, transformation, and loading can be done in two ways, right? So the first way is code-based ETL, and the other is GUI-based ETL. So if you are able to write a code and achieve the ETL, then it's called as code-based ETL. So you can write a PLSQL program to achieve the ETL, and you can write a Unix script, and also you can write a COBOL program to achieve the ETL. So these are called as code-based ETLs. And next is GUI-based ETL. So using click and drop methods, if you are able to achieve the ETL, then it's called as GUI-based ETL. So in the current market, so Informatica, Data Stage, and Ab Initio are the leading tools available in the market, and there are other tools like Talent, etc. But Informatica, among all the tools available in the market, Informatica is the tool which is a very powerful tool which has occupied most of the ETL market in the industry. So now let's understand more about Informatica. Informatica has client and server architecture, and it comes with two components: Informatica Power Center and Informatica Power Center Client and Informatica Power Center Server. Whereas a server component can be installed on the server machine, and client component can be installed on the multiple client machines, and multiple client machines can access the server machine, right? And when we install Informatica components, when we install Informatica server component, Informatica administrator homepage is the web-based tool which will be installed for the administrator to do his administrative tasks. And when we install Informatica client component, so there are four major tools which will be available for the developers to do the development. So which is designer, workflow manager, workflow monitor, and repository manager, right? And before understanding more about Informatica architecture, so let's understand what is a domain, what is node, and what is the service and repository, right? A domain is collection of nodes and services. So a domain is a collection of nodes and services. So let's see what is this node and what is a service. A node is a logical representation of a machine. You can call a node is a machine, right? A node is a logical representation of a machine. And service, right? So you can call service is the application which is running on a machine. So a node is a machine, and service is an application which is running on a machine, right? So when you install Informatica on the node, so Informatica services will be running on the Informatica server by default, right? So the collection of these two together can be called as domain. A service is application which is running on the node. A domain is a collection of nodes and services. So next is repository. A repository is the centralized object which can be created on the database and where the Informatica code will be saved. So this repository will have metadata tables. So when you create a repository, there will be more than 600 metatables which will be created in the repository where the Informatica code will be saved in, right? And next is repository service. So this repository service is an application service that is created to access the repository. So basically we have discussed about repository, right, where we will be saving the Informatica code in it. So repository service is required to communicate with the repository. And integration service is the service which is created for the repository to execute or run the code. So basically, a repository service is used to access the repository, and integration service is created to execute the code which is available in the repository. So when the developer creates a code, so when he tries to save the code will be saved in the repository through repository service. And when the developer wants to execute the code will be executed by the integration service, right? So the integration service can understand the ETL code, and it can execute the ETL code, right? So now let's try to understand the Informatica architecture. So let's assume this is the server machine where we are going to install the Informatica server component. And now the Informatica server component is installed. So Informatica services are running on the Informatica server. So along with that, admin console, so administrator home page is the tool which will be available when we install the Informatica server. So to for the administrator to do his administrative tasks, right? So using admin console, administrator will be creating the repository on the database, and also he he creates repository service and integration service. So the repository service to access the repository, and integration service to execute the code in the repository. And assume the other box is Informatica Power Center client machine. So assume we are going to you know install the client component in it. So when we install the client component in it, so these are the four tools which will be available for the developer to do the development. So the client machine will be communicating with the repository service and the repository using TCP/IP connections, right? So now, so this is how Informatica architecture looks, right? So now let us see how client machine will communicates with the repository when creating the code, and how client windows will be seeing the code which is available, will be viewing the code which is available in the repository, right? So assume now there are two users, Informatica using Informatica client. So they have connected to the server, and there is a code which is available in the repository by name C1. So this code C1 uh, is available in both the windows. So is available for user 1 and user 2 as well, right? So this way, when there is a code available in the repository, if the users are having permissions to that particular code, the users will be able to see the code in their client machines, see the instance of that code in the client machines, right? So now let's assume user 2 has created code C2, and when he tries to save the code, Informatica client will create the connection, the communication to the repository service, and repository service will communicate with the repository, and the code C2 will be saved in the repository like this, right? So now user 1 is not able to see the code C2 which is available in the repository. If we refresh the connection, if you refresh his connection to the repository, then he will also be able to see the code which is available in the repository, provided if he is having permissions to that particular code, right? So like this, multiple client machines can access the repository and can access the code available in the repository. Now let us see how can we execute the code which is available in the repository, right? So assume user 1 wants to execute code C2 which is available in the repository, right? When he says execute the code C2, the client machine will create a connection, will communicate with integration service, and integration service will communicate with repository service, and repository service is going to communicate with the repository and fetch the code C2 which is available in the repository, and submit the code to integration service. Then integration service is going to analyze the code, is going to analyze the source system and the target system and the transformation as well, and it's going to create three threads. So reader thread to read the data, writer thread to write the data, and transformation thread to transform the data, right? So now after analyzing all these things, it's going to create a connection to the source and target as well, and then it's going to read the data from the source and bring the data to the Informatica server and do the transformation. So here, let's assume the employee name has to be brought to the uppercase. So that is the code which is written in the uh, you know in the code. So that is the function which is written. So let us see now. So it converts the data to the uppercase on the Informatica server, and then it writes the data to the target. So same way, see, it reads the data, it brings the data to the Informatica server, does the transformation, and then it loads the data to the target, right? So this way, Informatica is going to, you know, this is the Informatica architecture, and this way it's going to do the process, ETL process, right? So this is all about ETL process, Informatica architecture, right? So next class, um, we'll try to get introduced to the Informatica tool. So we'll see all the components practically. So from the next class, all the classes are going to be the practical classes, right? So thank you all. Have a good day. We'll meet in the next class.